integrated energy market stretching both east and west and north and south is highly important. And the United States is very active in promoting the transmission of electricity in a north-south direction in this region. We are also encouraging the expansion and full implementation of the transport provisions of the Afghanistan-Pakistan Transit Trade Agreement to help integrate those economies into the region and with their immediate neighbors. My second point, and this is a point that colleagues, again, in the earlier panel made, in particular ADB Vice President Zhang, which is that at the same time that infrastructure is being built and as hardware is being put in place, the software of economic integration needs to happen at the same time and happen very forcefully and effectively. I was extremely struck by the fact that among the nations of Central Asia, only 6% of trade is among the immediate neighbors, which means that the economies are still stuck in an old pattern of hub-and-spoke economics, shipping their goods and their service and receiving services and goods from very distant economies. And that is not an effective path towards economic development. It's absolutely critical that the economies of the region become more integrated, and in addition to infrastructure, that means removing barriers to trade and investment among these nations. Most important, and these were again discussed earlier, is steps to make customs procedures more efficient and bring down at the border barriers that get in the way of effective trade. Also important is removing of excess bureaucracy that makes it difficult for smaller enterprises in particular, because I'm sure that the majority of the enterprises in Kazakhstan that could, for example, invest in their immediate neighbors, or companies that could invest in Kazakhstan from their immediate neighbors are smaller companies. Removing excess bureaucracy in the establishment of new businesses and making it possible for these businesses to effectively set up networks is extraordinarily important. The United States, again, is active in this area. USAID has partnered with Central Asian countries to organize trade fairs, streamline business registration, facilitate customs, enhance banking services, and strengthen the legal and regulatory frameworks for a more competitive private sector. My third point, I believe that what Kazakhstan in particular is doing in having a multi-vector approach and reaching out in all directions to the major powers of the world for cooperation in economic development is extraordinarily intelligent approach. I've been recently in the Caucasus region, where the leaders there very much expressed their determination, and we had the minister from Lithuania here today expressing the same point of view, their determination to reach eastward to Central Asia. And China, it's obvious to us all, has brought new energy to this program with its challenges, and to these challenges with its one belt, one road concept, and also its strong support for the Silk Wind idea. The United States is very supportive of this approach of reaching in all directions, and we want to be, for our own purposes, a good partner. One of the key things that we can do is coordinating activity and working with key partners, particularly in Europe, for example, through the Eastern Partnership Transport Panel and Network and the Transport Corridor Europe-Caucasus-Asia, or TRASECA, to promote these kind of trade corridors. Finally, my fourth point, what can the United States bring to this equation in Central Asian economic integration and Central Asian economic development? The United States, I'm proud to say, has a earned reputation for being a nation that values fair play, transparency, and inclusiveness in growth patterns. And this is also something that our private sector is very much involved in and respects these principles, in addition to having state-of-the-art technology in areas such as energy, the internet, transportation, information technology, and the like. So the U.S. can really bring to bear in systems integration, but also in making sure that both on the policy front and on the project front, that the activities that are being developed are following these key principles of inclusiveness, of transparency, and of absence of corruption, to make sure that the benefits of infrastructure development and regional economic integration actually reach the broad swaths of the populations of Central Asia. So I thank you for the opportunity to speak with you all, and I look forward to our conversation. Thank you.
Большое спасибо, господин Куртонг. Очень насыщенный доклад, несмотря на краткость, он включает очень огромный спектр вопросов. И, конечно, очень хорошие рекомендации, и в частности, устранение административных барьеров и в отношении включения самых различных аспектов сотрудничества в рамках Великого Шелкового пути, в рамках регионального сотрудничества. Конечно, сегодня, если посмотреть, очень много проектов реализуется и другими странами региона, в частности, Центральной Азии. Эта дискуссия сегодня продолжается, и как раз вот площадка Астанинского форума позволяет объединить различные взгляды, различные проекты, различные инициативы в один крупный проект, который можно было назвать действительно евразийский такой проект «Шелкового пути», в котором заинтересованы и страны Европы, и страны Азии, и, конечно же, страны, которые находятся на пути, это Центральноазиатский регион. И в этом плане, конечно, вот каждая страна сегодня реализует свои проекты, поэтому объединение усилий и скоординированность этих действий, наверное, позволило бы укрепить возможности сотрудничества и развития, именно инклюзивного развития всего региона. Это очень важная задача и очень интересные высказывания господина Куртонга. Я думаю, что очень интересно было бы. Следующее слово я хотел предоставить господину Невашу. Вы как знаете, что проект «Шелкового пути» включает не только Центральноазиатский регион и страны соседние, но и, конечно же, очень сильно заинтересованы в этих проектах и страны Турции, Ближнего Востока. И в этом плане, конечно, уже имеет перспективы и развитие в южном направлении. Поэтому господин Халилун Неваш, генеральный секретарь Каспийского стратегического института.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. 2008 global financial crisis had some devastating effects on world's economy. The balance sheet of the financial sector has sharply declined in many developed countries, and economic activity had significantly slowed down. The decline in economic activity reduced world trade volume by more than 20% in 2009. Central banks all over the world have shown extraordinary responses to the financial crisis. For instance, after the collapse of Lehman Brothers, third largest investment bank in US, Federal Reserve has increased the size of its balance sheet from $900 billion to more than $4 trillion in 6 years' time. These efforts had paid off, and both developed and developing economies had experienced a strong recovery in 2010 and 2011. The average global economic growth rate during this period was 4.7%. The speed of economic recovery has been different among the developed countries. Low energy costs due to the shale gas revolution had led to a decoupling of US economy from other developed economies. Europe was the most negatively affected region from the global financial crisis, and the total real GDP of EU by the end of 2013 is still lower than the level in 2008. Despite the strong recovery all over the world in 2010 and 11, economic growth rates have declined in 2012, and this trend has continued up to today. This trend supported the argument that monetary and fiscal policies have a limited impact to achieve long-term sustainable growth. In terms of long-term economic growth, increasing multilateral trade and building the necessary infrastructure for the establishment of trade networks have become much more important than ever. In this context, countries at the Caspian region, Central Asia, and the Caucasus have key roles. Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, and Turkmenistan, with a large hydrocarbon resources, benefited from the rapid increase in energy prices after 2002. Per capita GDP of Azerbaijan has increased from $760 to more than $7,000. Per capita GDP of Kazakhstan has increased from $1,650 to $13,000 between 2002 and 2012. Turkey is not so much lucky and has no proven hydrocarbon resources, but Turkey has also experienced a rapid economic growth rate due to its soaring domestic demand, which is financed by strong banking sector. Turkey's per capita GDP has increased from $3,000 to more than $11,000. An increase in income is equal to an increase in purchase power. Purchasing power results in an increase in trade volumes. For instance, in Turkey, the total trade volume has increased from $87 billion to $403 billion over the last 10 years. In Azerbaijan, the number has increased from $11 billion to $42 billion. Despite the high economic growth rates and increased trade volumes, intra-regional trade is only 5 to 6% of total foreign trade of the Central Asian countries. It has vital importance to increase intra-regional trade among these countries to achieve long-term sustainable economic growth. Besides that, dependency on oil and gas revenues is a threat for further economic improvement. The recent decline in oil prices confirmed the importance of economic diversification for the Caspian region. Improvement of transportation network will provide access to new markets, and it will develop non-oil industry. All these steps are key to achieve sustainability in all means, sustainable economic growth, and increased welfare of the nations. It's vital to focus on production of value-added goods. Economic policies should be revised on this direction. Export volumes, rather than import volumes of the Caspian countries, should be increased. This requires expansion in transportation networks. If competitiveness and innovation combined with enhanced transport connectivity, this will succeed long-term economic growth. Modern Silk Road or Silk Road Economic Belt or 21st century maritime Silk Road. These cover a wide area from Pacific coast to Europe. Main aim of this Silk Road project is to enhance regional connectivity and interaction with large-scale infrastructure projects. This connectivity and interaction will not be only in economy and politics, but also in social and cultural issues. And I would like to mention here about the Middle Corridor. Middle Corridor is the key component of the Silk Road initiative, passing through Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Turkey, and we can also include Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and so on, which connects with Trans-European Transport Network. All these countries have great potential for trade and investment. Middle Corridor will flourish the potential because it has so many advantages. I'll give you some numbers and I'll compare length and costs of different routes. And these numbers we gathered at the workshops we have done at the Institute. The southern route between Turkey and Kazakhstan that passes from Tehran, Ashgabat, Tashkent, and reaches to Almaty. It is the longest route, which is 6,200 kilometers. It takes 25 to 30 days to transfer cargo along this route, and it costs approximately $5,500 to $6,000. And the second route I would like to mention is Samsun-Kavkaz train ferry line and railway from Kavkaz to Almaty, which is 200 kilometers shorter than the southern route, which is approximately 6,000 kilometers long, and it takes 22 days. Transport of cargo along this route costs 500 to 1,000 less than the first route, which is the southern route through Iran. And the third route I would like to mention is transport along Cherkezköy, which is a city in, on the Black Sea of very close to Istanbul, to Varna, Ilichevsky. Almaty line takes 18 days, and it is the most costly route, which is $6,250. Middle corridor that connects Baku-Tbilisi-Kars railway line, Caspian Sea, and Central Asia till Almaty is 6,240 kilometers long, and it takes 16 days. Total cost along this route is approximately $4,900 US, and it is the cheapest option. If additional railway line between Jezgazhan and Beyneu would be completed, total length will be reduced 988 kilometers, and total transport time will go down to 12 days, which will be the shortest way. Considering cost, time, and length of all the routes, middle corridor that includes Baku-Tbilisi-Kars railway and Caspian transits is the optimal east-west route from China to Europe through the Caspian Sea and Turkey. There's a huge potential for trade and transportation between Asia and Europe. It is the most important, it is important to complete transport projects along the middle corridor to connect all the countries to create the most economic and the shortest transport route. Hopefully my presentation is helpful, and thank you very much for listening.
Большое спасибо, господин Кальдун-Неваш. Очень интересный доклад и конкретные цифры приведены. Действительно, торговля в регионе требует очень серьезной активизации. И этому будут способствовать как раз инфраструктурные проекты. Конечно же, сегодня обсуждаются самые разные вопросы, самые разные проекты по транспортировке. И представленный проект вызывает достаточно очень хороший и большой интерес. И важно, конечно, мобилизация и государственных, и частных инвестиций на развитие таких возможностей для бизнеса, для взаимодействия и для увеличения торговли. Я хотел следующее слово предоставить господину Ерболаю Солженицыну, старшему партнеру McKinsey Company.
Спасибо большое. Хотелось сегодня поговорить на самом деле о не столько инфраструктурной части или торговой части возможностей вот этого проекта, а на самом деле подумать о тех возможностях, которые этот проект позволяет дополнительно развивать. Ну, во-первых, как часто говорится, но просто полезно вспомнить, что, в общем-то, что это такое? Это довольно мощная идея, но идеи, они только становятся сильными, когда их начинают поддерживать люди. И вроде, судя, по крайней мере, по энтузиазму в обсуждении в СМИ, то, что отдельные сессии здесь выделены, в других странах это тоже идея озвучена, была какая-то потребность, очевидно, в том, чтобы в этой части мира почувствовать, что тоже есть какой-то проект. Потому что есть, понятно, американского, западного полушария нафта, есть европейский как бы союз, европейские комьюнити. А в Азии было много разных вещей, но, наверное, важно просто среагировать на то, что если эта идея позволила многим загореться, то, наверное, предыдущие объединения, APEC, там другие, ну, как-то недостаточно мощно ее озвучивали. Это пространство, о котором идет речь, ну, можно по-разному считать, но, в принципе, это где-то 60% населения планеты, 60% населения планеты. Это где-то 20, 25, 30% от разных экономических показателей, в зависимости от того, как измерять. И, в общем-то, по нашим оценкам, до 50-го года, если так смотреть вперед, это может быть почти, в принципе, 3/4 экономического роста нашей планеты. То есть это не только та же песня, которая в других регионах, что давайте тоже подумаем о интеграции, а это, в общем-то, во многом может определять то, как, каким образом и с какими темпами будет развиваться экономика нашей Земли. Все понимают, что уже и торговля юг-юг растет, что вообще-то говорят, что был век Атлантического океана, был период торговли через Тихий океан. Все больше и больше торговля по Индийскому океану тоже начинает развиваться, и можно об этом думать вот в таком контексте, потому что тут, в принципе, с нюансами, но, в принципе, здесь и Африка, и Ближний Восток, и Индия, и Китай, и все вокруг лежащее. Мы делали некоторые исследования того, какие возможности, может быть, открывает этот проект, и просто хотелось поделиться некоторыми пунктами, опять же, понимая, что, в принципе, времени достаточно мало. Ну, в рамках инфраструктуры, да, было много сказано о том, что много есть проектов, нужно строить, вводить эти мощности. И, конечно, здесь тема какая? Многим странам нужна инфраструктура, но они не знают как, и денег не всегда достаточно. Особенно для тех стран, у которых доходы завязаны на нефтяные доходы. А тут Китай. Китай много денег, большие мощности по инфраструктуре, понимание, как ее строить дешево, и по большому счету они ищут рынок для применения этих мощностей. Ну, в принципе, win-win. Потому что если не бояться того, что приходят китайские, так сказать, там, мощности и тебе строят инфраструктуру, тогда, в общем-то, все выигрывают. У людей психологически здесь могут быть, так сказать, опасения, но я думаю, что, в общем-то, экономическая логика должна выигрывать. Но в связи с инфраструктурой несколько идей. Первое. Имеет смысл в рамках вот этого нового объединения, новой идеи создать базу данных о всех вводимых и рассматриваемых инфраструктурных проектов, чтобы люди более точно представляли себе, все участники, более точно представляли себе, где возможны узкие места или где возникают дисбалансы. Потому что когда много стран начинают развивать инфраструктурные проекты, вопрос стыкуемости этих проектов, вопрос баланса, вопрос вот этих, коллега говорил о разных путях, он становится очень важным. Поэтому идея номер один – такая база данных. Второе – обмен опытом по эффективным ведениям, управлению крупными проектами и строительству. Очень не хватает этого опыта, он есть и в Китае, он есть в других странах, но, может быть, даже какие-то раз в год или раз в 2 года совместные конференции, выставки, экспозиции по поводу того, как вести проект инфраструктуры, была бы неплохая идея. В плане развития также стран очень важно понимать, что навыки очень разные. Для того, чтобы эти проекты работали, нужны люди, чтобы их строить, потом нужны люди, чтобы на них работать. Поэтому попытки создания механизмов повышения навыков, образования, на особо некоторые целевые профессии тоже могли бы приобретать транснациональные границы в рамках вот этого большого проекта. Еще одна идея, знаете, некоторые страны очень многое достигли по созданию доступного жилья. Если мы говорим об объединении, где 60% населения планеты, которое в частности жилье точно является не для всех решенным вопросом, то на самом деле распространение технологий и подходов по созданию дешевого и доступного жилья может быть огромным рычагом для повышения благосостояния людей, но также и рычагом для роста тех отраслей, которые завязаны на стройку. На самом деле можно сказать, и я, может быть, завершу этим, что тоже навыки управления государствами очень разные в этих регионах. И многие из компаний, многие страны задают сейчас вопросом, как им повысить эффективность системы госуправления. Не столько даже политические реформы, сколько менеджерские, сколько управленческие. Потому что очень часто просто не совсем понятно, как от отличной идеи прийти к исполнению. Есть идея, что можно в рамках такого рода проекта, например, начать программу ротации государственных служащих между странами-участниками. Потому что многие эти страны друг друга вообще не знают. Это довольно революционная мысль, потому что люди привыкли, что ротация только для сотрудников внешних дипломатических служб. Но на самом деле, опять же, для того, чтобы познакомиться лучше друг с другом, и чтобы перенять навыки друг друга, и лучше понять то, как решаются задачи друг у друга, например, такого рода инновация тоже могла бы быть очень интересная. В этом смысле, вот коллеги говорили, что мало интрарегиональной торговли, наверное, также и мало интеррегиональных знакомств, и мало интеррегиональных общений. И вот это то, что сказали про hub and spoke, да, наверное, так. Все привыкли, что там, я не знаю, Лондон, Нью-Йорк, Пекин, там, Сидней. Очень много новых связей может и нужно создаваться, и надо думать, как их сделать на человеческом уровне, а за этим последует экономическое. Тоже с учетом времени, наверное, на этом остановлюсь. Спасибо большое.
Большое спасибо, господин Ермолай Солженицын. Действительно очень интересный доклад и очень ценные рекомендации. Я думаю, что они должны быть учтены. Это самая, наверное, практичная часть, которая необходима будет, наверное, для стран, которые хотят участвовать в таких крупных проектах в регионе. Следующее слово я хотел предоставить господину Эндрю Шахаяну, представителю Всемирного экономического форума.
Good morning, everyone. Very excited to be here. It's my third Astana Economic Forum. I wanted to thank the organizers for inviting me. And my first point I wanted to make is not only about the importance of this conversation. Every speaker before me said that the Silk Road question is very urgent and it's on everybody's mind. But what I wanted to highlight is the symbolism of where we are having this conversation. We are now in Central Asia, in Kazakhstan, the largest economy. And the Silk Road, a regional vision is to connect the biggest economic centers on the planet. And then we're looking at Asia and Europe. Where Central Asia and Caucasus come in are right in between. And it is important that this agenda is outlined within that region to make sure this is not decisions made by bigger economic powers, but it is an integral part of that vision. It's an economic corridor, not just a transit corridor. And I think almost every speaker, including the Deputy Prime Minister Sagintayev, made that very clear. It's not simply a transit route. It has to be a value-adding route. It has to be a dynamic looking into the future that creates prosperity for not just connectivity, but prosperity for the region. I represent the World Economic Forum. You surely have heard of us, and besides Davos and competitiveness report, we've done a lot of work on many other topics. And one of the projects we did, I don't want to claim that we had the foresight, but a year and a half before President Xi Jinping arrived in Astana to announce the Silk Road initiative, year and a half before that, we looked at the Trans-Caspian region. We did not focus on 5 republics of Central Asia or Caucasus, 3 countries of the Caucasus. We looked at this wider region, looking at 8 countries together and trying to understand the dynamics. What motivated us? Why did we decide to pursue that project? I think where we are in Geneva, we're looking outside into the world, there are a lot of misconceptions. There are a lot of assumptions about Central Asia, 5 countries coming from a common past, must be integrated, there must be ongoing trade. There is Caspian Sea, there must be trade there across the sea. If you take an average person looking at the region without any deep knowledge. And I think those assumptions are there, and then we decided to test it. And the way we approach this project, we normally do not focus on either policy advice or a very kind of immediate ramifications of our research work. We looked into the long future. I think a number of speakers highlighted that question. If we take a 20, 30, 50-year perspective, what are the mega trends that will drive the development? And that, again, I remind you, was before the Silk Road announcement was made. But to us, that was interesting. What is going to affect the development of that region? Speakers before me mentioned this lack of intra-regional trade. I share with you a quote that stuck with me from one of conversations we've hosted. And the gentleman made it very succinctly. He said, if Marco Polo were alive today, he would encounter more obstacles crossing this region, Central Asia region, than he did in the 13th century. Think about it. Going back to my original point, Central Asia needs to be setting its own agenda. It cannot let other bigger economic powers make decisions for the region. And therefore, it is important that the region thinks among the countries that are involved, what is their common vision? What is their vision for joint prosperity? Another statistics I wanted to share with you is UNDP estimated that there's so much synergy that's being stifled in Central Asia region that the GDP could be doubled in a span of 10 years simply by allowing a bit more of that interconnectedness. And we're not talking about GDP of Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan or Tajikistan, GDP of the region. It's always The mentality of dividing the pie is the old mentality. We need to keep thinking of synergy and win-win scenarios, and that was a major finding of our work. Some of you might have seen the scenarios report. It's also available if you wanted to grab a copy on your way out. But what we focused on is looking at the situation as it is today, intra-regional trade amounting to about 6%. How do we create that dialogue? How do we stimulate those links? I don't want to, knowing that I'm hosted by Astana Economic Forum, I wanted to share some statistics I looked at. How many speakers or participants we have from inside Central Asia? In my estimate, it's about 1 or 2% of people that are attending the summit. And we're talking about Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan. It is in the interest of every one of those countries to find those connecting points. And a lot of people in this room are interested in this, and there is a lot of support for it. And I think it comes down to every country taking some steps, showing leadership, and finding that new common vision of prosperity. When we were doing our research, we understood that there are varying levels of development, that some economies are driven by natural resources, other economies are driven by agricultural production, trade, and there's a lot of variety of where countries are coming from. And in our approach, we wanted to look for the common denominators. What are the common aspirations? And let me share those with you. What we found an agreement on, and that I think should be our anchor going forward, is every country in this region, regardless of where they are looking to maximize their energy resource potential, be it hydro energy or hydrocarbons. What every country wants to do is integrate in the global supply chains. That's very clear. It's an ambition of every single country in the Trans-Caspian region. What every country, again, is looking at is to diversify. Be it Kyrgyzstan, where gold exports are the biggest exports, or take countries with oil deposits, where energy is a major export. Every country is interested in diversifying. And the last point is, again, important: develop a high-standard workforce. Again, a common vision. It exists. There are touch points that are shared. And I was lucky to visit the...
Sorry, graphic.
Sure, I'll finish up very quickly. I think I've actually timed myself to make sure I have a couple more minutes. So Nazarbayev University is designed to bring students from Central Asia and get that conversation going. And I think the bottom line, or maybe the main message I have, is this intra-regional cooperation creates potential for every single party involved, and I think we need to keep getting back to it and finding new connecting points there. Thank you.
Большое спасибо, господин Сахаян. Очень интересные предложения. Действительно, сотрудничество в регионе – это важный аспект и необходимость. И те цифры, которые вы привели для региона, наверное, действительно очень важны. Я бы хотел предоставить слово господину Агрису Премианису, главному экономисту по Центральной Азии, Европейского банка реконструкции и развития. Учитывая у нас ограниченность времени, господин Агрис, я хотел бы попросить короче сказать, потому что уже там следующая сессия подошла. Извиняемся, да.
7 минут управляемся. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It's the second year in a row I speak at the session about a Silk Road economic belt, and I have to say this year is very different. I think there has been a huge difference in terms of the understanding of the concept and in terms of the progress of its implementation. So what I want to talk about today is really say three things. One is that it is really important to be ambitious, and ambitious in terms of there were previous speakers spoke about different routes, so it's important to build more railways, including the southern route that goes through Kyrgyz Republic, Tajikistan, and others. I'll talk about Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. and its importance. And also, I want to talk about Europe. I want to talk about the need for Europe to develop strategy towards the Silk Route. Now, there has been a lot of debate, and indeed many have argued that this is an empty concept. There have been people who have argued that this is very much an expression of the Chinese imperial interests, imperial economic interests. But I think now there is a real watershed moment. I think there is understanding about importance of this concept. There's understanding of the detail. I think if you ask people along the Silk Route what it means, I think there is a much better grasp of what it is and what it can bring to the region. And I think it's hugely important, as previous speakers mentioned. I think it's certainly. Okay, this was not part of the my intended presentation, but thank you very much. I think this will liven things up a little bit. Yeah, it is incredibly important in terms of trade, in terms of investment, in terms of innovation, spillovers of innovation across the Silk Route. But let me start with the routes. This is not just about railways, of course, but ultimately it is very important to push forward with ambitiously diversifying different routes. We here in Central Asia, we talk a lot about Kazakhstan. I think it's also important to speak about other countries, and I think one of the things that the Silk Route will need to develop is even the southern, even more southern route than the previous speaker spoke about. It is connecting Western China, Kyrgyz Republic, Tajikistan, and others. I think the route that then going to Turkey, including also the Middle East. I haven't heard Middle East mentioned often today, but I think adding that region to the mix, I think will be hugely important. Then, of course, there are countries that are not on the Silk Route, but that are still very important. Take Pakistan and India. Adding those to the Silk Route would add huge markets that would be hugely beneficial to the concept itself, but also help regenerate the markets. Of course, recent Chinese announcement of the building the economic and energy corridor with Pakistan, the $46 billion, is just one indication of the ambition of China in the region. So I think adding those markets again will not just help the concept, but also help regenerate them, and then we'll be talking about increasingly larger economic space that will be captured by this. Now, the second point, and to me, this is most important, it's Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. To me, it's a watershed moment. The two biggest problems in my mind for establishing of the Silk Route were financing and also concerns about the Chinese dominance of the project. Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, with its 100 billion initial capital, certainly puts a lot of financing on the table. But it's also a bank. It's also a bank with project finance capacity, and it's exactly the kind of capacity that is needed for the infrastructure projects that will be developed along the route. Of course, the positive is also a challenge. The bank will be established very quickly, so I think it will be important to draw on the staff and resources from the commercial sector, from other international financial organizations. And getting that part right will be critical. Now, also it's a multilateral bank, and this to me is key, because we know that China is still going to be the largest shareholder of AIIB, but there'll be many other countries. There'll be countries from Asia, there'll be countries from Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, countries from Europe, including UK and France and others. And I think, again, having this multilateral structure will make countries along the route much more comfortable accepting money and having infrastructure finance from this particular source compared to the bilateral financing from China. And then the last point I will make is Europe. There was a question in the previous session about the Europe and its role. To me, there's a huge opportunity, but certainly there is no strategy at the moment. I think Europe is going through and has, in my mind, very difficult long-term economic situation. The population is aging. There are no obvious drivers of growth in the region. Now, and at the same time, I don't see any coherent strategy coming from Europe towards the Silk Route project. There are many projects aimed towards Central Asia. There are strategies about other corridors, but certainly establishing a strategy towards Silk Route would be would be necessary. Because for Europe, this is about trade, but for Europe, this is also about participating in the investment. It's about technology. It's about spillovers of innovation towards the region. Europe can export innovation along the Silk Route. Green economy, all the technologies where the sector is very strong. This may well become a green Silk Route at some point, and Europe will play a significant part in that. I will conclude in that, but just the very last point is that I do think that things have changed, and I do think that given especially Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, there will be very significant progress over coming months. I just would wish, myself being a European, although I'm based in Kazakhstan, that Europeans will get their act together is a strong word, but I think certainly would establish a strategy towards the Silk Route. Thank you very much.
Большое спасибо, господин Агрис-премьер. Очень интересный доклад и очень интересное тоже предложение. Действительно, к сожалению, у нас время закончилось в нашей сессии, и вопросы и ответы, к сожалению, сейчас мы не сможем задать. Поэтому я хотел прежде всего поблагодарить всех наших спикеров за очень интересные доклады и действительно очень практичные и конкретные рекомендации. Большое спасибо.